So hello, everyone. Today we have at least 4 items in the agenda. First of all, last week, or technically this week, right? We released, it was this week, yes, we released Kuma 1.6. You can check out blog post. Some notable features described here. I think I can briefly talk you through. So we added a preview of support for Kubernetes Gateway API, but Gateway API is still in is an experimental feature. Also, we improved our Inspect API that we introduced previously. Now it supports built-in gateway resources, so you can check what policies were matched for what gateway resource. Also, we improved zone egress a lot. I think we added support for standalone because for some reason before that it was only multi-zone. We added locality-aware routing for external services, and we finally added support for fault injections and rate limiting on zone egress. What's next? Yeah, we did a massive rewrite of transparent proxy. I think we will speak about this later, this call. Yeah, many improvements of Helm charts, like exposing CP with an ingress. I think also, yeah, security context as well. And metric to see how long configuration change to take propagate. Yeah, and this. So a lot of changes, great release. I think we will speak about some features in particular later. But yeah, try it definitely. So we can move to end-to-end improvements, and I think Jacob can shed some light on that. Do you want to share screen, or do you want to?
I don't.
That's fair enough. So
no, but I can talk about what is going on here. Yeah, so
if you want me to open something, I can open issue, for example.
Oh, I think that's fine. So yeah, we are trying to improve our end-to-end testing story. We have pretty complex end-to-end tests, which spawns like multiple Kubernetes clusters and Dockers and everything, right? Especially to test a multi-cluster setup. The problem with those tests is that, well, it's slow, right? Because you need all those Kubernetes clusters, you need to deploy Kuma on multiple things, you need to connect, deploy apps, so the whole setup takes a little bit of a time. And to run a full suite sequentially, it's probably like 2 hours. So that's why we parallelize this on the CI to a multiple VMs. And we are trying to speed those tests up because, well, that's a feedback loop if we develop a new feature, right? Obviously, there is a huge value in improving this. So our strategy is to have 3 sets of the environment, one for the universal standalone, one for standalone Kubernetes, and the third one for the multi-zone deployment. And the strategy is to deploy Kuma once and then run tests on different meshes, right? This way, we don't need to wait to like deploy, delete Kuma all the time. It also improves the stability of the product because we are testing the mesh isolation, right? If we by any chance get into some bugs, then, well, that's actual bug in the product, right? So there is this advantage, and yeah, and that's it. So I'm working on preparing the environment. For this, we have Kubernetes standalone merged and universal pending. So that's in progress. I hope we can like speed our end-to-end test very like much by the factor of 10, maybe 100. Let's see.
Is it easy to rewrite new tests, old tests to the new environment, or it's most likely like it, or it's like copy pasting?
It depends on the tests. With some of the tests, we were kind of well, lazy, right? So we had, for example, multiple its, and we were recreating an environment on every like test case, right? So obviously, if we rewrite the test for the new thing, you need to really take care of cleaning up the environment between those its. which is something we should be doing for from the day one, right? So I expect with many of tests there will be some extra work with cleaning up, but I migrated a couple of them and it was pretty straightforward.
Are there any questions about end-to-end improvements? If
yeah, I have one question, I think. How do you think this would make it possible to run end-to-end tests on other environments? So at the moment we run on like Kind and K3D. I've thought about in the past that maybe we could run at least a subset of our end-to-end test suite, like we used to do a while back on, like, you know, Elastic Cloud, Elastic Kubernetes Service, and that kind of thing. How much do you think it would be complicated to do that?
I see no reason why we should not run this on the clouds.
Okay.
So we should be able to just run this suite on the EKS and so on.
I see few reasons which, but not related to the running the test, but to the infrastructural part of spawning and cleaning.
Yeah. Obviously, the CI is a tricky part to spawn the GCP clusters and so on, right? But from the test framework and driving the test and so on, it should be the same.
I mean, we have to see, but if the tests are a bit cleaner now, as in like they don't require a new environment each time, maybe it's more feasible into just always having the Kubernetes infra running and just have Kong be happy about paying the few $100s that is a month.
It's much better. From my experience, when I wrote the test for the EKS and for the AKS, the biggest problems and the biggest point of failure was actually it was unpredictable to spawn the cluster. Everything could break, or the limits, or something was wrong, or the timeouting in the API, etc. So like 90% when it was failing, it was because of unpredictable state of spawning or cleaning.
Okay.
V clusters, that's an interesting idea. Yeah. That's also an option that we.
But then it means we have to maintain it, and we already have a lot of work with the CI and the infrastructure.
True. Yeah. This is a trade-off. Yeah. So let's see. Of course, as a first step, we need to run this on our setup on our CI with K3D and Kind.
Yeah, one thing at a time, right?
Yep. Exactly.
Cool. Next point is Kuma T-shirts. For everyone that is not aware of that, we are giving away Kuma T-shirts that anyone that has done any kind of level of contributions to Kuma. It could be, you know, contributing some good issues or like having PRs merged. There is a link in the contributing.md to the form you need to fill in to like receive your T-shirt. So yeah, don't hesitate in getting your T-shirt. It's like free closers.
That's cool. Yeah, I think we can move forward. And transparent proxy rewrite, I think Bart can tell us what that.
And give hints. That was actually some time ago. We decided that it's good to kind of improve ourselves in the area of transparent proxy and CNI, which we have in the same flow. We decided to split it into 3 actually main routes. One of these routes is actually rewrite the IP tables generation, which we already are right now doing. The second part was to actually rewrite the CNI part, which is calling these rules. And the third one, it was to write like a proper black box tests, which will not test what rules are generated, but if, for example, our transparent proxy is redirecting all incoming traffic to one port, we want to know if there is, if we will install this transparent proxy, if the packets are really going where they should go. So that was a non-trivial thing, as it appears, because I actually was focusing currently on these 2 things, the black box tests and the IP tables rewrite. And my main goals with this IP tables engine, because we decided to call it an engine, because in the future we will add additional engines, was to first simplify it. Currently, it's overly complicated with a lot of overheads with the issues which we are not using, which are even not supported but by our model, friendly envoy model. The second thing was to make it easy for people to debug, and that's the tricky part, because it's not actually a lot which we could do there without a lot of efforts, but I currently at least made the whole rules generation, the longer names with some descriptions out of some of the rules, the more trickier rules, which what they are doing, why they are doing this. And the third thing was to actually write the rule generator in a way where when you look into the actual functions, the function calls, you can understand the rule which will be generated. So, and the fourth actually thing which is beneficial from that approach was we now have more safety mechanism in a way of types, where before we were just generating the string with the IP table rules without actually validating if this rule is valid. Now we have this kind of validation, not very complicated, but at least from the perspective of the types which can be used inside to generate the rules. The next part, which was trickier, was this black box test, because my main points I wanted to satisfy is to not use external tooling. So we tested using only Go, which is tricky because to really isolate environment to test if the packet is going from the one place to the other in a way it should go, was I had to create the separate network namespace, but like creating the separate namespace means that the call which is calling to create this namespace is going directly into this namespace, and what we want to do is actually to put something there like TCP server in that area and call from the outside of the namespace, send some packets and see if the packets first arrives to the server. The second one, if the underlying socket has the original destination set. So that was tricky, very tricky, because the namespace are thread bound, OS thread bound, and Go doesn't allow to play with threads at all. You can lock it, so I spent some time in figuring this out. And what I succeeded to do today is to have tests for the inbound part of our transparent proxy. Tomorrow I plan to finish the outbound parts, and what will be left is to test if the DNS redirection works. And after that, what will be great is that it doesn't matter if it will be IP tables. If we will add additional engine, for example, I don't know, I don't want to say it, but I will say it, eBPF engine, it can be run inside this test because it was designed as a test framework. So you can take parts, write your tests, use this to run your generation, like transparent proxy installation inside the test, and then see if it's actually working. So that was tricky, but we are progressing a lot in that area right now.
What? Sorry.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask if there are any questions.
Yeah, I have one question. What Linux distributions are we? Linux distribution are we support?
It doesn't matter. It's the only the version of kernel is, I don't remember fully. It's free or something and above, which supports network namespaces.
Something weird was happening on OpenShift, if I recall correctly, like IP tables rules, because I think under the hood there is something like NF tables, and yeah, I'm just wondering if it will work.
So NF tables actually from I think 5 years IP tables are deprecated, and the NF tables is actually the next step at top of the. It's actually the client, the user space client for the netlink set of IP APIs. And what in 99% of cases right now, all distributions comes with the layer which is translating the IP tables to the NF tables. But if it will be if there won't be any this translation layer and will be NF tables, then we would have to write additional engine, which is not very. It won't be really problematic because the NF tables are actually much better, and there are better like a tooling for working with them. But we don't have it right now, and we'll see if it will be necessary to write this.
Okay, thanks.
I have one question. Is there any way to provide observability of IP tables? Yes. Because that's one of the pain points right now, that, okay, IP tables are applied, but then you cannot inspect them in any way because we don't have permissions.
By default, there is a match extension which allows you to add rules to send every packet logs inside the syslogs. And I kind of was thinking about adding it right now in this initial version. There's nothing like that, but I have the rules written down. I just would have to add logic to the generators to generate the rules for this. But yes, there is possibility to do it.
Okay.
It's not. Don't get me wrong. It's not that great because you just will see a lot of noise in logs, but there is a way to do it.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions, or we can move forward? Okay, I think next item, it's probably John, or am I wrong?
No, you're right. Yeah, so this is, we probably don't need to spend too long on this, but like right now we bundle the Helm charts or the contents of the Helm chart, right? The YAML for the Helm chart in Kuma CTL and use that for our installer. That means that, and I know we've gone to aligning the version of the software with the version of the Helm chart, which I think is great. But I think it would be really cool if we were able to override that for like a bug fix version of the Helm chart that we might want to release on a more frequent cadence than the software release. And right now that coupling means it's not possible. It will also just give us a bit more flexibility. So like, I'm not anticipating, like, I'm not suggesting changing the UX of how this works. I'm just saying we should pull the Helm chart or use the local Helm chart that is already pulled to install. Or we should provide an override if you want to use a different version of the Helm chart. Obviously within the caveat that like if you use a different major version, then it's probably going to break, right? Because we've introduced the alignment, but it would allow you to at least use a newly released bug fix version of the Helm chart that wasn't necessarily shipped with the CLI. Hopefully that makes sense.
Maybe we should unbundle Kuma Cuddle as well, because it's kind of like client server, like we had kubectl and Kubernetes server, they're different versions. So I don't know if it's possible.
Yeah, also don't disagree with that.
I think that would be the actual solution. The issue with the Helm chart is we use the resources from the Helm chart in Kuma CTL. So if we ever fix the Helm chart, this fix also belongs in Kuma CTL. So we'll always have to release a new Kuma CTL.
That's exactly what I'm saying by this point, right? Like, is the code in Kuma CTL in such an impossible way to pull out? Like, couldn't we just pull the Helm chart and use the external, like run a template with our own values and then just use the Helm chart? Or do we have to, is it like super intrinsically bundled and unpullable out?
I don't think so. I think the issue is this, that anytime we realize we have something wrong with the resources, it has to be fixed. Then anytime you, like, what we also want to fix is that the Kuma CTL install control plane gives you the same resources. So then you'd have to do something like there's going to be a mismatch no matter what you do, I feel like. Because if you have Kuma CTL 1.6.1, you then realize you have a fix. You don't want a Kuma 1.6.1 to install 1.6.2, even though that's the highest version of the Helm chart. You want it to install the most fixed version of 1.6.1. Like, I think what Ilya said is the real solution, is that we can just create a Kuma CTL release and a Helm release independent of Kuma.
Maybe I'm not understanding fully how like linked they are under the hood. Like, I felt like this would be simpler to solve, but I'm fine with that solution too.
Otherwise, but like I'm stretching here, it's like, could we imagine Kuma Cuddle, instead of bundling the Helm chart in line, it would download the latest Helm chart and do that?
That's literally exactly what I'm suggesting with this item.
Sorry, John.
Yeah. No. I'm like, thank you. You're obviously saying it in a different way to me, but like, that's basically what I'm saying. Pull out the logic that bundles it and just pull it ourselves and provide an override for which version you pull.
I think maybe we can talk about it more offline, but I think the issue is that the newest Helm chart is potentially not the same patch version as Kuma CTL. Like, if yeah, I can make it more clear offline, I think.
So in which case we'd need like a sort of mapping between like Kuma versions and Helm charts.
Exactly.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is maybe possible.
Yeah, it might be possible. I mean, in the docs, there's a thing like that because we generate docs and we want the references in the docs to be correct version-wise. But okay.
And I should say, I have no preference on the implementation whatsoever. I'm just like keen, and recently, you know, a lot of fixes have come up in the Helm chart, which are just UX improvements, which don't really change the software. So being able to release Helm releases at a different cadence from the software would just be super useful, I think. So, but the implementation, I don't mind at all.
I think it kind of makes sense. It's like the corollary of that, like, sort of makes sense as well. It's like at some point, it's quite likely that the Helm chart would stabilize. And maybe we wouldn't want to ship the Helm chart with every release because it hasn't changed.
Do we have any issue to proceed this discussion?
I don't think so, but I can create one and I'll update the agenda here so there's a link.
Yeah, please do.
Please, John.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. And the last item, I think it's design for sidecar customization. Who wants to cover it?
This is me as well, but I think most folks are familiar with it. So there've been a lot of cases recently where folks have needed, end users have needed to customize the sidecar container definition for actually a variety of reasons, right? So just a few off the top of my head. One of them is security context, so that we fixed that in another way. Actually, no, we haven't. We do need to do security context. Also the ability to mount custom volumes to the sidecar container, the ability that came up recently, the need to be able to add a pre-stop hook to drain Envoy prior to the app shutting down. Now, that's probably significant enough that we can add additional UX around it. But if we had a break glass way of customizing the sidecar, it would be, you could work around it today, right? So I don't know whether I've thought really a lot about the implementation here. In terms of having a working sidecar, there's not really that many requirements. Like, should we even allow end users to customize the image they run? I've definitely had cases where like I've done a real quick hotfix in the image and it would be super useful to modify the image as well. Should we just provide a container spec template as a config map and then we could just load it and run it, and if it doesn't work, then you probably know what you're doing and it's fine? I mean, like, is there a good reason not to do that? But our sensible default would just be working.
So we just chatted about that. So Paul has started working on it. So like, you want to take it, Paul?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're just trying to look at the design for this, but like basically what me and Charlie were just talking about, like literally right before this call, was kind of what you were describing is kind of like along the lines of what we're talking about. So but also I'd like, I mean, I only have like a minute left here, but I'll be getting more of your feedback and other people's feedback on the design in the next day or so. Is that good? Again,
Sounds good.
let's prioritize. We're working on it, right? And we want more feedback from the people who are going to be affected by it.
Yeah, because I also dug into like the tickets with Marco earlier today, and we found another one where someone wanted to specify the resource limits and requests based on a specific pod would require something. Probably like for this specific use case, it would probably be a deployment, not a pod. But I think these are all valid use cases in some ways. So yeah, probably having the container spec and then matches on this saying like this deployment use this like container template for the sidecar or something like that. It has to remain sort of simple. I was wondering as well what other service meshes might be doing, because we might not be the only ones, right?
I looked at Istios, and unless it's changed, they have an annotation where you can just provide just an arbitrary blob of JSON, which just gets like merged into there. It's a solution. Let's not do that.
Yeah, that seems very hacky.
Yeah, okay, guys, unfortunately, we're out of time. So we didn't have time for Q&A as usual, but I think you know where to ask your questions. So it's a community Slack, and that's it. So thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye-bye.